The rain had come without warning. One moment, the streets were alive with the vibrant hum of evening traffic. The next, they were soaked in silver streaks, puddles, gathering at the corners of cracked sidewalks. Arya dashed under the awning of a closed bookstore, her blouse clinging to her skin, her hair plastered to her face. She pressed her hands around herself and exhaled sharply, a small cloud forming in the cold air. Of all days, she thought, it had to rain today. Today was supposed to be different. She had finished her shift at the design studio early, planning to meet her best friend for coffee before heading home. But the city had its own rhythm, its own cruel sense of timing. The storm had caught her unprepared, her umbrella forgotten at home. She was ready to resign herself to waiting when she noticed him. Across the narrow street, standing at the corner, was a man with a single black umbrella. His tall frame was outlined against the blurred city lights, his suit impeccable even in the downpour. But what drew her eyes was not the sharpness of his appearance. It was the way he stood, perfectly still, as if the rain itself bent around him. People rushed past, jostling umbrellas, cursing at puddles, but he didn't move. His gaze was locked on something in the distance, intense, like he was waiting for someone who might never arrive. Arya's breath caught. For reasons she could not explain, she felt the pull, that strange magnetism you sometimes feel toward a complete stranger, the kind of pull that made no sense, that belonged in novels, not in real life. And then his eyes shifted. Across the rain-drenched street, his gaze met hers. The world blurred. The traffic noise faded into a muffled hum. The city dissolved into streaks of silver and shadow. His eyes were dark, unreadable, but the moment stretched between them, fragile and electric. Arya startled herself by looking away first. What the hell are you doing? She thought, her pulse racing. He was just some stranger, probably waiting for his girlfriend, or his wife, or maybe he was just another businessman, lost in thought. And yet, why did it feel like he had been standing there for her? She dared a glance back. The corner was empty. The man with the umbrella had vanished into the storm. Later that night, Arya sat by her window, wrapped in a blanket, watching the rain blur the glass. Her apartment was quiet, the hum of the city softened by distance. She told herself to forget him. People came and went. Strangers passed each other every day. But still, she couldn't shake it. His gaze had left a mark, as if something unspoken had been promised in that single, stolen moment. The next morning, she convinced herself it was nothing. She had deadlines, clients waiting, and a boss who had already reminded her twice that her creativity was brilliant, but distractible. The stranger didn't matter until she saw him again. This time, it was not the rain. It was broad daylight, the streets dry, the world ordinary. Arya was carrying a roll of design drafts through the lobby of her office building when she froze. He was there, standing by the reception desk, speaking to the manager with a quiet, confident voice. The black umbrella was gone, but she recognized him instantly. The sharp suit, the poised frame, and most of all the eyes. Those same dark eyes that had met hers in the storm. Arya's grip on her drafts faltered. Papers slipped, scattering across the marble floor like fallen leaves. "Damn it," she whispered, crouching to gather them. She hadn't expected him to move, but suddenly, he was there, kneeling across from her, his hand reaching for the same sheet of paper her fingers grazed. Their hands touched, just a brush, light as air, but it was enough to send a shiver racing through her arm. "Careful," his voice was low, smooth, laced with something she couldn't quite place. "You'll crumple the edges." She looked up. Their faces were closer than she expected. The lobby noise melted again, like it had in the rain. His gaze held hers, unwavering, almost searching. For a second too long, neither of them moved. Then she yanked her hand back, clutching the papers to her chest. "Thanks," she muttered, standing quickly, heat rising in her cheeks. He stood as well, unhurried. A faint smile curved his lips, the kind that seemed to know more than it should. Arya, her breath caught. "How does he know my name?" Before she could ask, the receptionist approached, holding a file. "Mr. Kieran, the documents you requested." Arya froze. Kieran. The name rolled in her head like thunder. So he wasn't a stranger. Not anymore. He had a name, a presence, a reason for standing here. But how did he know hers? She wanted to ask, but his phone buzzed, and he excused himself with a polite nod before walking toward the elevators. As he passed, his eyes flicked to hers once more. It was brief, but the weight of it pressed into her chest, and then, just like before, he was gone. That night, Arya couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment again and again. His voice, his touch, the way he had spoken her name. There was no reason to feel this way. Fee was probably just another client, another name in the endless flow of the city's elite. She had no business thinking about him. And yet, when she finally drifted into restless dreams, she dreamed of rain, and of a man holding a black umbrella, waiting at the corner, as if bound by a silent promise. Arya arrived at the studio early the next morning, determined to bury herself in work. She told herself she wouldn't think about him, not the storm, not the lobby, not the way his voice had rolled her name across the air like he'd known it forever. But she wasn't built for denial. As soon as she sat at her desk, her eyes drifted to the lobby, visible from the wide glass windows. What if he comes again? The thought made her pulse skip. Her best friend and colleague, Maya, noticed immediately. Maya was the kind of woman who wore bold red lipstick at 9 in the morning and carried gossip like it was oxygen. "You're glowing weird today," Maya said, sliding a latte onto Arya's desk. "Who is he?" Arya blinked. "Excuse me," Maya smirked. "Don't play dumb. I can read your face like a book. You look like you've seen a ghost or worse. A man worth losing sleep over." Heat rushed to Arya's cheeks. "It's nothing. Just a client." Maya arched a brow. "Ma'am, and does this client have a name?" Arya hesitated. "Kieran." The effect was immediate. Maya nearly dropped her coffee. "Wait, Kieran Hale." Arya frowned. "You know him." "Everyone knows him," Maya hissed, leaning closer. "He's the Kieran Hale, CEO of Hale Enterprises. Youngest to build a corporate empire, practically from scratch. Brutally private, never photographed without that steel look in his eyes. Some say he's ruthless, others say he's brilliant. All agree he's untouchable." Arya's heart thudded harder. Then why would he? She stopped herself before the words spilled out. "Why would he know my name?" Maya's grin widened. "Don't tell me he noticed you." "I told you it's nothing," Arya muttered, hiding behind her screen. But inside, a storm brewed. The day dragged. Clients came and went. Deadlines pressed. And yet, every time the elevator dinged, Arya's head lifted involuntarily, expecting him. He didn't come. Not that day. But that evening, when she left the studio and stepped onto the dimly lit street, she saw him again. He stood beside a sleek black car coat. "Arya." She froze. "Some moments," he said, his tone low, almost a whisper, "are not accidents. They're reminders." She turned, but his face revealed nothing. No smile, no smirk, only that steady intensity. "Good night," she managed, her voice barely audible. "Good night," he replied. Arya stepped out, her legs unsteady, her mind a whirlwind. She hurried into her building, pressed her back to the closed door of her apartment, and exhaled shakily. She didn't know what scared her more, the mystery in his words, or the part of her heart that wanted desperately to believe them. That night, sleep didn't come easy. The memory of his eyes haunted her, the way he had spoken as if bound by something larger than either of them. And though she tried to resist, a dangerous thought took root in her heart. Perhaps the promise wasn't silent anymore. Arya told herself she wouldn't think about him. Not the car ride, not the gallery memory he'd confessed, not the way his voice had lingered on her name like an unfinished thought. But denial was fragile. By morning, she was already restless. She caught herself pausing in front of the mirror too long, adjusting her hair, smoothing the edge of her blouse. Silly little gestures, never cared for before. Maya noticed the moment Arya entered the office. "You didn't sleep," Maya announced, her sharp eyes catching everything. "I did," Arya lied. "Ha, and I'm the Queen of England." Maya sipped her cappuccino. "He's under your skin already, isn't he?" Arya frowned. "It's not like that." "Oh, please. Men like Kieran Hale don't look at women like they're background noise. If he's orbiting you, there's a reason." Arya tried to dismiss it, but the words lodged themselves in her chest. A reason. 2 days passed, with no sign of him. Just when Arya began convincing herself that the storm had passed, he appeared again, this time not in the lobby or on the street, but inside the studio itself. He stood tall in the reception area, speaking to the manager. Heads turned, whispers rose, and even the normally unflappable receptionist looked flustered. When his gaze found Arya across the room, her pulse stumbled. He crossed the distance in steady, measured steps. "Arya," he said simply, as though her name was a key that unlocked silence. "Kieran." She tried to keep her voice even. "What are you doing here?" "I need your eye," he replied. She blinked. For art," he clarified. "I'm curating a private collection. I'd like you to advise me." Arya stared. "There are dozens of professionals, more qualified." "I don't want them," he cut in smoothly. "I want you." The bluntness of his tone sent a tremor through her. His words weren't laced with flirtation. They were deliberate, weighted, as if backed by something unspoken. The manager, eager to please, practically shoved Arya forward. "Of course, Mr. Hale. Arya's one of our best," and just like that, she was trapped. The following evening, Arya found herself stepping into Kieran's world. His penthouse was less a home and more a sanctuary, built of glass, steel, and silence. Expansive windows framed the skyline, and scattered across the vast rooms were paintings, some abstract, some hauntingly realistic, all demanding attention. She wandered slowly, her fingertips brushing the air near each canvas. "These are remarkable," she whispered, half to herself. "They're fragments," Kieran said from behind her. She turned to find him watching her, his coat discarded, sleeves rolled, the harsh edges of his demeanor softened by the golden lamplight. "Fragments of what?" she asked. "Of memory, of things I can't say out loud." The honesty in his voice startled her. Arya looked back at the paintings. Each piece seemed to echo something: a storm, a yearning, a silence stretched too long. "You chose them because they remind you," she murmured. His gaze locked on her. "Yes." Arya's throat tightened. She should have asked professional questions, should have kept this distant, but the air between them was thick with something heavier than professionalism. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why bring me into this?" Kieran took a step closer. "Because you see what others miss. Because you stood in front of a painting years ago and understood it without words. Because, whether you realize it or not, Arya, you're part of this." Her heart hammered. Part of what? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached past her, his hand brushing so close to hers that it sent shivers up her arm, and adjusted the tilt of a frame. Arya backed up, desperate for space. But the room itself felt smaller now. "This is too much," she said quickly, forcing steadiness into her tone. "I shouldn't be here." But when she turned toward the door, his voice stopped her cold. "Arya, don't run from this." Her breath caught. The way he said it, like a command, laced with vulnerability, rooted her to the spot. She faced him again, torn between reason and the pull of something dangerously magnetic. "You don't even know me." A shadow of a smile touched his lips. "I've known you longer than you think." The evening ended with more questions than answers. Kieran didn't press further, only walked her to the elevator, his silence louder than any confession. Back in her apartment, Arya collapsed onto her couch, heart still racing. She wanted to call Maya, to spill every confusing detail, but some instinct kept her quiet. This was felt too fragile, too raw, to put into words. Instead, she stared out at the night sky. Kieran's words, replaying in her mind. "Don't run from this." But wasn't running the only sensible choice? And yet, as the hours slipped by, one truth pulsed louder than her fear. She didn't want to run. The following week blurred into deadlines, client calls, and long evenings. Yet through it all, Arya carried a constant hum inside her chest. Kieran Hale's presence lingered, not just in memory, but in reality. He appeared unpredictably, sometimes at the studio, sometimes waiting by his car outside her building, always with that steady gaze that saw too much. She told herself to resist. She reminded herself of the gulf between their worlds. A man carved from ambition and shadows. She, an artist still finding her voice. But resistance crumbled a little more each time their paths crossed. On Thursday, he invited her to a gallery opening. "It's small, private," he said, "but you'll want to see it." Arya almost declined. Almost. But the way he'd said, "you'll want to," made it impossible. Against her better judgment, she found herself walking into a softly lit hall, filled with canvases that seemed to breathe with unspoken emotions. Kieran stood beside her, silent, letting her take in the art. She moved slowly from one piece to the next, bleeding into each other, figures blurred, but reaching, as though yearning for something just beyond reach. They're haunting, Arya murmured. They're honest, Kieran replied. She turned to him. Is that what draws you? Honesty. His jaw tightened slightly, but his eyes softened. Yes. Honesty has a way of surviving, even when everything else doesn't. Something inside her twisted at his words. She wanted to ask what honesty he carried, what ghosts lived in his silence, but the question stuck in her throat. Instead, she said quietly, it's like they're telling stories without voices. Kieran's gaze lingered on her, unreadable. Exactly. Later, they stepped out into the cool night air. The city buzzed around them, but between them there was only silence, the kind that pulsed with meaning. The days that followed were dangerous. Arya found herself noticing the smallest things, her phone vibrating with a message and hoping it was him. The sound of polished shoes in the studio hallway, making her heart lurch. The rain against her window, reminding her of that night when the storm had nearly broken the space between them. She was losing ground, and she knew it. Maya didn't miss the signs. You're distracted, she said bluntly. One morning, I'm fine. Maya crossed her arms. Fine doesn't stare at her phone every 5 minutes, like it's a lifeline. Arya sighed, setting her brush down. It's complicated. Maya leaned closer. Then either let him in or cut him off before it hurts. Arya wanted to argue, but the words tangled inside her. She didn't even know what this was. How could she decide whether to embrace it or end it? That evening, Kieran appeared again, as if summoned by her turmoil. He was waiting by his car outside her building, posture as composed as ever, though his eyes softened the moment they met hers. Walk with me, he said. Something in his tone left no room for refusal. She nodded, and they set off down the quiet street. The city's usual roar softened into a distant hum. They didn't speak at first. The silence stretched. But unlike before, it wasn't suffocating. It was charged, alive, like a current running beneath the surface. Finally, Arya broke it. Why do you keep finding me? Kieran's gaze flicked to hers. Because I promised myself I would. Her chest tightened. A promise you never made out loud. He nodded once. A silent promise. Arya's steps faltered. That doesn't make sense. It will, he said quietly. In time, she shook her head, frustration battling with curiosity. Why not now? Why can't you just tell me? He stopped walking, turning fully toward her. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned. Because the truth isn't ready, and neither are you. Her breath caught. Anger and longing tangled in her veins, leaving her trembling. You think you get to decide that for me? His jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he'd step back, retreat into the fortress of his silence. But instead, he closed the distance between them in a heartbeat, his hand lifting to hover just shy of her cheek. I'm trying not to destroy this before it begins, he said, voice low, raw. Arya froze, her pulse thundering. The heat of his nearness, the intensity in his eyes, it was too much and not enough. Kieran. Her voice broke on his name. He drew a sharp breath, as if her saying it was both a wound and a balm. His hand brushed her cheek, at last, feather-light, almost reverent. The contact sent fire through her veins. For one suspended second, the world narrowed to nothing but the space between them. And then he let go. Kieran stepped back, his face shuddering. Not tonight. The words cut, sharp and unfinished. Before she could respond, he turned, leading her back toward the car. The ride home was silent. Not heavy this time, but fractured like glass that could shatter at any touch. When the car stopped, Arya lingered, her hand on the door handle. You confuse me, she whispered, not daring to meet his eyes. His reply was immediate, quiet but firm. I confuse myself. She looked at him, then caught in the storm of something he wasn't saying. For once, she saw the crack in his armor, the flicker of vulnerability beneath the ruthless exterior. It made her ache. Good night, she said, though the word tasted bitter. This time, he didn't correct her. He only watched as she walked away, his silence clinging to her long after she closed the door behind her. That night, Arya couldn't paint. She couldn't sleep. She paced her small apartment, replaying every word, every glance, every touch that had hovered on the edge of more. Maya's warning echoed in her mind. Either let him in, or cut him off before it hurts. But how could she let him in when he refused to open himself fully? And how could she cut him off when the very thought left her breathless with loss? At last, she sank to the floor, her heart raw, whispering into the dark. "What are you doing to me, Kieran?" The silence offered no answer, only the echo of a promise she hadn't meant to keep. The week unfolded like a test Arya hadn't prepared for. Kieran kept appearing, sometimes planned, sometimes not always catching her off guard. A morning coffee left on her desk, with no note but his presence lingering in the doorway. An invitation slipped between work calls. A single glance across the lobby that seemed to root her in place. It was dangerous, intoxicating, and maddening all at once. Maya noticed. "He's breaking you down," she declared. One evening when Arya tried and failed to paint. "I'm fine," Arya lied again. Maya rolled her eyes. "Fine is when you don't forget which color you were holding in your hand. You've been staring at the same canvas for 20 minutes. Arya sighed, setting the brush aside. "It's like he's everywhere and nowhere at the same time. P says things that make no sense, and yet they feel like the only thing that makes sense." Maya softened a little. "That's the problem with men like him. They make you believe in storms when you should be looking for shelter." But Arya didn't want shelter, not anymore. On Friday, Kieran asked her to meet him, not at the gallery, not at his penthouse. This time, it was a quiet rooftop overlooking the city. The skyline stretched like a glittering map, the air crisp with the promise of rain. She found him, already there, hands in his pockets, the city lights painting sharp lines across his face. "You came," he said, as though he hadn't been sure. "You asked." She replied softly. He studied her for a long moment before speaking. "Do you believe in inevitability?" Arya frowned. "You mean fate?" Her chest tightened. "But I can't." His head snapped toward her, eyes narrowing. "Then, why are you here?" The question cut deep. Why was she here? Because, despite every warning, every doubt, she couldn't stay away. "I don't know," she admitted. Kieran's gaze softened, though the tension in his body didn't ease. "You do know. You just don't want to say it." Her heart pounded. "And what if I don't?" "Then I'll wait," he said simply. Arya blinked. "Wait? For what?" "For you to admit what's already between us." He took her to his penthouse again, the skyline burning in the distance, like 1,000 silent witnesses. But this time, the atmosphere was different. Arya walked among the paintings, her fingers itching to trace the strokes. They looked different tonight. Less like art, more like confessions bleeding onto canvas. "Did you paint these?" she asked suddenly. Kieran stiffened. Her breath caught. "You did." He didn't answer, but the silence was loud enough. Arya turned to him, searching his face. "So much of you is in these. Why hide it?" "Because weakness is dangerous," he said flatly. Her voice trembled. "And what am I to you, Kieran?" "A weakness." He crossed the room in 2 strides, stopping just inches from her. His hand lifted, brushing against her jaw, tilting her face toward his. "Few," he whispered, "are the only thing that feels real." The words undid her. Their lips met again, the kiss deeper, more urgent than before, as though both were fighting time itself. His hands held her like he was afraid she might slip away, while hers tangled in his shirt, pulling him closer, desperate to erase the distance that always lingered between them. When they broke apart, breathless, Arya's heart was racing. "Then, trust me," she pleaded. "Tell me everything." But Kieran stepped back, the walls sliding back into place. "Not yet." Arya's stomach dropped. "Why do you keep saying that?" His eyes darkened. "Because once you know, there's no going back." Later, when he drove her home, Arya stared out the window, her chest heavy with conflict. She wanted to believe in him, in the softness she glimpsed behind the steel. But his silence was suffocating. His secret's a barrier she didn't know if she could climb. When they reached her building, he stopped her before she could leave. "Arya," he said, voice low. "Whatever you hear, whatever they say, don't doubt what's between us." Her throat tightened. "And if what they say is true?" His gaze held hers, steady, unflinching. "Then, let me be guilty of everything. Except of you." Her heart twisted at the contradiction, so certain, yet so broken. She stepped out, her legs trembling, her mind a storm. And in the darkness of her apartment, with the city's whispers clawing at her window, Arya realized the truth she'd been avoiding. She was already too deep. Arya woke restless. Dreams had tangled her sleep, shadows of Kieran's face, whispers of words he'd never spoken, paintings bleeding into darkness. By morning, she couldn't tell what was real and what her mind had invented. Work didn't help. Every headline screamed his name. Some called him ruthless, others brilliant, but all painted him with suspicion. Her colleagues avoided direct questions, though their glances said enough. By mid-afternoon, Arya couldn't take it anymore. She needed answers, not from rumors, not from Maya's warnings, but from Kieran himself. She found herself standing outside his gallery, the glass reflecting her nervous face. Inside, the air smelled of paint and polished wood, and there, in the center of it all, stood Kieran, back turned, shoulders rigid. When he noticed her, his expression shifted from surprise to wariness. "You shouldn't be here." "Then why did you let me in?" she asked softly. A long silence passed. Finally, he sighed. "Because I wanted you to come." He led her into a private room she hadn't seen before. It wasn't curated. Like the gallery, it was chaotic. Canvases stacked against walls, half-finished pieces scattered like abandoned thoughts. "These are mine," he admitted, almost grudgingly. Arya's heart raced. So she'd been right. These weren't acquisitions or secrets from another artist. They were him. His confessions, laid bare in color and shadow. She approached one canvas, a storm, over a faceless figure, standing at the edge of a cliff. The brushstrokes were violent, desperate. "This is you," she whispered. Kieran said nothing, but his silence was confirmation enough. "Why hide this?" she asked. "Because I wasn't supposed to be an artist," he muttered. "I was supposed to be an empire." Arya turned to him. "Your family." He nodded once. "Tell industries, power, legacy, bloodlines. My father built walls so high, I never saw daylight. Painting was the only place I could breathe. But he called it weakness. So I buried it, and I buried myself with it." The rawness in his voice shook her. This was more than scandal or business deals. This was the fracture at his core. "Is that what the headlines are about?" she asked. "Your father." Kieran's jaw tightened. "My father and his empire. I walked away years ago. But you don't walk away clean. Not when you know the things I know." Arya's chest ached. She stepped closer, reaching for his hand. "You don't have to keep carrying this alone." For a fleeting second, he let her hold him. His fingers tightened around hers, his eyes heavy with something unspoken. But then, just as quickly, he pulled away. "You don't understand," he said hoarsely. "If I tell you everything, it won't just stain me. It'll stain you too." Her voice trembled. "Let me decide that." But Kieran shook his head. "Not yet." The rest of the evening blurred into silence. Arya left the gallery with more questions than answers, her heart torn between trust and doubt. When she reached home, Maya was waiting on her couch, arms crossed. "You saw him again, didn't you?" Arya froze. "Maya, don't lie to me, Arya. I can see it all over your face. You're falling for him." Arya sank into the chair, exhausted. "What if I already have?" Arya hadn't expected to see Nathaniel again so soon. But the Hales had a way of appearing when least wanted. 2 days after their unsettling meeting in the gallery, he walked into her studio as though he owned the place. His suit was immaculate, his smile practiced, but the air around him carried the same chill as their first encounter. "Arya," he greeted smoothly, "hard at work, I see." She stiffened. "How did you find me?" Nathaniel's eyes gleamed. "When you're a Hale, there's very little you can't find." He walked closer, studying her canvas without asking permission. "Interesting. You paint with emotion, not precision. That's what drew him to you." Her brush slipped. "What do you want?" Nathaniel tilted his head. "To help. To warn too. Perhaps save you from what's coming." Arya's stomach twisted. "I don't need saving, don't you?" His voice was silk, but laced with venom. "Kieran doesn't tell you everything. He never has. You see pieces, but not the whole. And when the whole comes crashing down, you'll be collateral damage." Arya's pulse raced. "If this is about family business, it's none of mine." Nathaniel chuckled, low and humorless. "Everything is your business now, because you've become his weakness. And that, my dear, is a very dangerous place to stand." Before she could respond, Maya appeared at the doorway, frowning at the scene. "Who the hell are you?" Nathaniel turned, his smile widening. The brother, the shadow, the truth. Kieran won't share. He gave Arya a final, sharp look. Think carefully, Arya. You've seen the cracks. Don't let them swallow you whole. And just like that, he was gun leaving, the air poisoned in his wake. Tears burned Arya's eyes. So the scandal, the headlines, some true, some not. But the worst of it, the worst, hasn't surfaced yet. And when it does, I'll be painted as my father's heir, whether I deserve it or not. Her heart broke for him, for the boy who'd been trapped in shadows too long. She stepped closer, laying a trembling hand against his chest. You're not your father, Kieran. His eyes closed, as though her words hurt more than they healed. But I carry him inside me. Every choice I made in his name. Every life he ruined while I stood silent. She shook her head fiercely. You're not silent anymore. You're here, with me. For the first time, his walls cracked fully. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly, it felt like he was anchoring himself against a tide. His lips found hers in a kiss that wasn't desperate this time, but broken. An apology, a confession, a plea. When they finally parted, he whispered against her hair, "You deserve someone untouched by shadows." And yet, she breathed, "I only want you." For a fleeting moment, it felt like a turning point, like they might finally be free of the silence that chained them. But the illusion shattered the next morning. When Arya arrived at her studio, the door was unlocked. Inside, canvases were torn, brushes snapped, colors spilled across the floor like blood, and on her desk lay a single card. Stay away from Kieran Hale, or you'll burn with him. Arya's hands shook as she held the card, the ink burning into her vision. Stay away from Kieran Hale, or you'll burn with him. The words felt alive, crawling under her skin, coiling around her throat. She didn't hear Maya come in until her friend gasped at the wreckage. Arya, what happened? Arya dropped the card as though it might scorch her fingers. Someone was here. Someone new. Maya picked it up, her face hardening as she read. This isn't a joke. This is a threat. Arya's chest heaved. I think it's Nathaniel. Maya's jaw clenched. Then, that's even worse. If Kieran's brother is willing to cross that line, you're already in. Deeper than you realize. Arya's voice broke. What am I supposed to do? Just walk away? Pretend none of this ever happened? Yes. Maya's voice was sharp, desperate. Walk away, before this destroys you too. Arya, he's not safe. He's not. Arya's eyes filled with tears. But I love him. The room fell silent. The confession shocked even her. It was the first time she'd said it aloud, and it shook her to her core. Maya's shoulders slumped, her anger giving way to sorrow. Then, you're already gone. That evening, Arya went to Kieran. She didn't call first. She couldn't risk being ignored. He opened the door to his penthouse. Surprise flickering across his face at the sight of her trembling form. What happened? He demanded instantly. Arya shoved the card into his hand. His expression darkened as he read. He tore it in half, then in half again, his jaw like stone. Nathaniel. You're sure? She whispered. Who else? His voice was low, dangerous. This is his way of reminding me what's at stake. He thinks fear will drive you away. Arya's throat tightened. Maybe it should. Kieran's head snapped up, his eyes burning. Don't say that. Arya couldn't tear her eyes away from the headline. Kieran Hale, implicated in secret fund that crushed small artists. The article was merciless, outlining allegations that Hale Industries' Kieran's name had funneled money into projects that pushed out independent galleries, leaving dozens of struggling artists ruined. It was everything she feared. Everything. She loved her art, her studio, her fragile place in the world, reduced to ashes in a single accusation. Maya hovered in the doorway, her face pale. Arya, you have to see what this means. I see it, Arya whispered. Her voice shook, but her hands were steady, clenched tight at her sides. It means I need to hear it from him. Or, it means you need to finally let him go, Maya urged, her voice softening. Please, Arya, before this destroys more than just your art. But Arya was already grabbing her coat. When she reached Kieran's penthouse, the atmosphere felt heavier than usual. The city stretched beyond the glass, glittering coldly, but Kieran stood in the shadows, as if he didn't belong to it anymore. He didn't speak when she entered. He didn't even move. Arya's voice trembled as she broke the silence. Tell me it isn't true. Slowly, his eyes lifted to hers. Which part? Her heart cracked. The fund. The artists. My world. Kieran, tell me you didn't destroy it. His jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. It wasn't supposed to be like that. Arya's stomach dropped. So it is true. I signed papers I didn't read, he admitted, his voice rough. I was young, still under my father's command. He told me it was an investment fund, legitimate, harmless. By the time I understood what it was doing, it was too late. The damage was done. Her chest heaved. Do you know what those artists lost? Do you know what it means to pour yourself into something only to watch it be crushed? His voice broke, raw and unguarded. Yes, I know exactly what it means. That's why I left. That's why I've been trying to build something different. But the past doesn't care if you change. It only waits to drag you back. Tears blurred Arya's vision. And you never thought to tell me this. Not once. I thought I could protect you from it. Her voice cracked like glass. You don't protect someone you love by lying to them. You protect them by trusting them with the truth. For a moment, silence roared between them. Then, Kieran took a step forward, his hands reaching for her, desperate. Arya, please, don't let this be the thing that tears us apart. I'm not that man anymore. She pulled back, shaking her head. But you were, and you let me believe you were only guilty of silence, when all along you were guilty of so much more. His face twisted with pain, but he didn't try to argue. He only whispered, I'll carry it all, if I must. But don't walk away. For heart warred with itself, love against betrayal, desire against doubt. She wanted to believe him, wanted to hold on to the man who kissed her, like she was his salvation. But the truth weighed heavier than any promise. She turned away, tears streaking down her cheeks. I don't know if I can do this, Kieran. His voice followed her to the door, ragged and breaking. Then, tell me what I can do to make you stay. But she didn't answer, because she didn't know. That night, back in her apartment, Arya sat before a blank canvas. For hours, she tried to paint, to pour her confusion into color, but every brushstroke collapsed. Finally, in a burst of anguish, she hurled the brush across the room. The canvas stared back at her, empty and accusing. Maya entered quietly, her face solemn. So it's true. Arya nodded, her throat too tight for words. Maya wrapped her arms around her, pulling her close. Then, you have to decide, Arya. Do you love him enough to forgive the man he was? Or will you let that man destroy the woman you are? Arya clung to her friend, sobbing quietly, because deep down, she knew Maya was right. And she also knew that no matter how much she wanted to walk away, her heart wasn't ready to let go.